You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening, world. And how are we tonight? All ready for another exciting and international Haunted Histories once again? I do hope so. It's Penny here, your hostess with the haunted mostess at your service. Now, apologies first. Our listed guest, Tammy Guyamathi, had to postpone her appearance on the show tonight due to ill health. So I'm sure I'm not alone in wishing her, hi James, a speedy recovery so that she can come back on and chat to us again some point later in the year. She sent her profound apologies, but I'm sure we won't hold it against her. Now, before I start talking about what we're going to be looking at tonight, believe me, it's a wealth of both history and the spooky when you start looking into it. And this place is also where my lovely husband proposed to me. But I do have a few other things to mention. Don't forget that yours truly is going to be lugging her aged bones around 10 kilometres of Brighton next month in aid of Dementia UK, and that there is still plenty of sponsorship room available should you choose to take pity on me. Please take pity on me. I'm really not looking forward to this. Also, we have a competition to announce. 2 tickets to an investigation with our lovely, lovely friends at Fright Nights London to Fort Horsted this very weekend. Now, you may recall we did a show on Fort Horsted back in November time, and it's a really fascinating place, and the guy who manages it really is at one with the building. He knows every single nook and cranny, and if you are an information junkie, like me, he has more knowledge than you would know what to do with. It's also the place that has the amazing pencil graffiti on some of the walls, although unfortunately the general public doesn't get to see it, as it's very fragile and it's on sort of whitewash paint, and it would literally just blow away if you accidentally just touched it. Some of the writing is over 100 years old and was written during the First World War. I can say from personal experience, having been lucky enough and privileged enough to look at it, that it is actually quite mind-blowing and also quite humbling to read comments from men who, in all likelihood, never came back. If you want to know more and you aren't lucky enough to win the tickets, have a listen to the show we did on the fort. So before I go any further, firstly, thank you to everyone who liked and shared the post and entered to win. The winner is... It's... what have we got? Kelly Edwards. Well done, Kelly. You've won the 2 tickets. We'll be in touch with you and we'll be passing on your details to the guys at Fright Nights London so that they can get in contact with you and give you all the details. I really hope you enjoy your trip to Fort Horsted. Make sure you let us at Parasearch know what happened and what you thought, because we're always generally interested to hear people's opinions. But if all you tell me that it was dark, then you may get met with a bit of a facetious comment regarding getting a better torch. But well done, Kelly. Kelly Edwards, the winner of the 2 tickets to Fort Horsted. Hi Johnny, hi Richard, hi Kerry. Richard, I'm going to be talking about Reinhard. So, feel free to critique me, as I know you love to do when I start talking about war history. Just a little in-joke between me and Mr. Richard Clements there. So, last week we were chatting with our gorgeous friend of Parasearch. Have you noticed we have a lot of friends? Never been so popular. Sarah, of Living Life in Full Spectrum, about Blackrock House in Australia. We did have a few technical problems with the broadcast in that it basically stopped playing out 20 minutes in. But both bits are on Spreaker. Good, Richard. Yeah, you're looking forward to that, aren't you? Both bits are on Spreaker if you want to listen, and please do, as Sarah's love and knowledge of the place is second to none. And it really makes an old cynic like me happy to hear someone with genuine affection for a building talk. But I am sorry about the glitch. Call it a ghost in the system if you wish. So tonight we're off to the Czech Republic and its capital, the beautiful and mesmerising Prague, the city of 1,000 spires, and a UNESCO monument and home to 1,000 ghost stories. Alright, I have no proof of the 1,000 ghost stories bit, but when I start to tell you some of the history of the place, I'm sure your supernatural spidey senses will be tingling with the possibilities. Now, for the purposes of tonight, because it is just going to be me talking and I don't want to bore the trousers off you all, I'm going to look at 4 different eras of Prague, if that's okay with all of you. Trust me, there are so many more that we could probably talk for hours, but I thought that 4 may be interesting enough to cover the time and hopefully not send you all to sleep. You ready? Cool. Well, I want you to picture the 1500s Prague, a hustling and bustling centre of Bohemia, and in 1575 one Emperor Rudolf II came to power, part of the Habsburg dynasty, one of the most influential and powerful European ruling families of the time. So outstanding that they held the throne of the Holy Roman Empire for over 300 years, and as a family didn't die out until the 18th century. Anyway, Rudolf, and I do have to thank Andy Mercer for this piece of information, was seen as a real patron of the art of alchemy and all things mystic. Now, for those of you who don't know what alchemy is, it's the believed turning of lead into gold. Well, things such as alchemy and astrology were regarded as mainstream scientific fields in Renaissance Prague, and Rudolf was a firm devotee of both. His lifelong quest was to find the Philosopher's Stone, excuse me, and Rudolf was very forward in bringing renowned alchemists to his court, such as Edward Kelly and John Dee. Rudolf even performed his own experiments in a private alchemy laboratory. When Rudolf was a prince, Nostradamus himself prepared a horoscope which was dedicated to him as Prince and King. In the 1590s, Sendivogius was active also in Rudolf's court. Rudolf gave these people free rein to practice the mystic arts and the development of alchemy without fear of reprisal from the church. Probably wasn't as benevolent as he sounds, as I would guess he was going to benefit from any of the gold that he thought they might make, but hey-ho. Rudolf gave Prague that mystical reputation that persists in part to this day, with Alchemist's Alley on the grounds of Prague Castle, which is a popular visiting place and tourist attraction. Rudolf is also the ruler in many of the legends of the Golem of Prague, either because of or simply adding to his occult reputation, which does lead me on to my first first legend, the said Golem, the Golem of Prague. Well, in the 16th century, so during the 1500s, during Rudolf II's reign, the Jewish people of Prague were under constant attack, and an elderly man by the name of Rabbi Judalow, in an attempt to protect the Jewish community against the pogroms, created a golem, a mute, strong giant resembling a normal man, supposedly made from the clay of the beautiful Vltava river, and with the word Emet, meaning truth, imprinted in its forehead. The golem would protect the people of the Jewish quarter and would do the rabbi's bidding, as it was Lo's Hebrew incantations which brought it to life. As the golem grew, he became stronger and more violent and started to spread fear as he reportedly killed at whim. Negotiations with Rabbi Lo to stop the golem if the persecutions of the Jews finished resulted in the word emet being changed to met, the E being rubbed out. Met, meaning death. Now, the legend doesn't end there, because the rabbi's son, as legend has it, brought the golem back to life, and it remains today protecting the Jewish quarter of Prague. Go and visit there if you ever go, and see if you can find the man of clay. I can say I visited the Jewish quarter, didn't meet the golem, but it is a fascinating place to go to. So, let's fast forward 50 years or so to Prague in the 1600s. It was during this time that Bohemia was involved in the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648. It was actually fought by many of the European countries, and not just for one reason. There was religion, dynastic reasons, territorial, and even, believe it or not, commercial reasons for the fighting. But one of the main factors in its starting was due to the second defenestration of Prague. Yep, that's your new word of the day. Defenestration. It's not actually as confusing as it sounds. It basically means someone's thrown out of a window. They're defenestrated. It's not bad, is it? Sounds a lot worse than being thrown out of defenestrated. Anyway, anyone, write that down. Word of the day. You never know, there might be a test on it later. But the window in question was one of Prague castles, which sits high on a hill overlooking both Vltava River and the iconic Charles Bridge, which we're going to come back to shortly. And I can say Prague Castle is on the top of a hill. Even for reasonably fit people, it's a lung buster to get up there. But it's well worth it. Well worth it. The throwing out of a window of Count Willem Slavata of Chlum, Count Jaroslav Borzitsa of Martinez, who were known Catholic hardliners, and Philip Fabricius, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing these wrong, curse of reading names that, I don't know if I'm pronouncing them right, someone please tell me. Anyway, this Philip Fabricius, the secretary to the regents. Now, Count von Thurn, who had been deprived of the position of castellan, so running the castle, and replaced by Borzitsa of Martinez, turned to both Borzitsa of Martinez and Slavata and said, "You are enemies of us and our religion. You have desired to deprive us of our letter of majesty, have horribly plagued your Protestant subjects, and have tried to force them to adopt your religion against their wills, or have had them expelled for this reason." Then to the crowd of Protestants he continued, "Were we to keep these men alive, then we would lose the letter of majesty in our religion, for there can be no justice to be gained from or by them." Soon after, the two regents and their secretary were defenestrated. Tell me in the comments page what defenestrated means. Check that you are actually listening to me. No? Someone? Come on. Easy test. But these men survived the 21-metre fall from the third floor. Catholics maintain this to be a miracle, as they would, saying that angels or the Virgin Mary had saved them. However, the Protestants had a far more, literally down-to-earth reason for the fact these men didn't die. Thank you, James. Well done. Brownie point to you. Saying that the reason these men didn't die was more likely because there was a dung heap they had landed on. So basically the Catholics landed in shit. There we go. Anyway, and can I just say, I don't care what religion people are. It's true, they landed in shit. It was dung. It was shit. What can I say? Anyway, These events were the precursor to one part of the 30 Years' War, and were to lead to some more horrific events that I'm going to describe shortly, which have become ingrained in Prague's history. Thanks, Richard, for that little sort of tidbit. Appreciate that. And the minute I mention war, you're going to come up with something. I don't talk about how the 30 Years' War came to an end. I haven't got 30 years to talk, so yeah, but thank you for that one. At one time, Prague was a lot lower than the city that you see today. And because it was right on the banks of the river, which was a lot wider than it is today, and winds its way through the city, and because of its proximity to this massive body of water, the same body of water actually which you'd have seen Vin Diesel as Triple X diving into, and also the same body of water I very nearly dropped my engagement ring into when my now husband proposed. True story. The town flooded on a regular basis, which, as you can probably guess, wasn't really great for the inhabitants. So the original old town was, instead of being extended out, was extended up. As they were developing, all the rubbish that they were excavating was put over the older parts of the town, making it higher, making it what they call now a new town, which is actually very confusing, because if you go to Prague now, there is the old town and the new town. And the new town is a very much more modern facade compared to the old town, which is full of fairy story-esque buildings and Gothic churches, which just seem to grow in stature in front of you. It's quite grim fairy story, sort of grim as in Grimm Brothers fairy story. Honestly, it is an amazing place. Anyway, this building and raising of the level is what gave rise to the underground tunnels, which were actually featured on a 2010 episode of Most Haunted, when they spent a number of nights in the Czech Republic. And do you know what? Because I love you all and I like to do my research, I watched those episodes on YouTube. I did. I watched them from start to finish. How dedicated to the cause am I? Anyway, sarcasm aside, I've got to amuse myself. I've got no one else to talk to apart from you lovely people in the chat room, so hey-ho. But how does this fit in with the 30 Years' War and the horrific tale which I'm about to tell? And I'm not being sarcastic there, it is pretty darn horrific. Well, where the old town hall stands... Thank you, Kerry. You know how painful that would have been for me. You know, but it was a 7 years old episode, so hopefully it was reasonably accurate. No dolls caught fire anyway in it. Where the old town hall stands, right by the infamous astronomical clock, or orloch, which stands on its southern wall. The clock mechanism itself has three main components: the astronomical dial, representing the position of the sun and the moon in the sky, and displaying various My husband met the Golem of Prague. Are you being sarcastic, Richard? You comparing me to a golem? Anyway, statues of various... Richard is now off my Christmas card list. Statues of various Catholic saints. I'm trying to read here, guys, and you're making me laugh. You're distracting me. Anyway, statues of various Catholic saints stand on either side of the clock. The Walk of the Apostles, I'm ignoring you now. The Walk of the Apostles, a clockwork hourly show of figures of the Apostles and other moving sculptures. Notably, a figure of death, represented by a skeleton, striking the time, and a calendar dial with medallions representing the months. Well, the clock itself has been there since the 1400s, and that itself has its own myths and legends attached to it. None more so that the original believed inventor had been blinded by the town council to stop him making more clocks of its ilk. And he then vandalised the clock so that it wouldn't work for 100 years. Anyway, I digress. I do digress. And yeah, Richard, you're off my Christmas card list now, comparing me to a golem. Cheers, mate. Yeah, really, yeah. I married the guy. I can't be that bad. Anyway, when you go underneath the street level of the old town hall, which sits in the old town square, you will come across a maze, an absolute maze of different rooms. Now, before the town was built over, sort of hundreds and hundreds of years ago, these would have just been normal living quarters. And one of them even contains something that looks like an old pizza stove. Or not even an old pizza stove, the sort of brick pizza oven type things that you see, which would actually been used for the bakers. It would have been a baker's oven. But I actually said that in the voice, Carrie, my precious. Yeah. Oh, God, where was I? What was I talking about? Anyway, baker's oven. So the original use of this room, you're all putting me off. You're horrible. Would have been innocent and pretty much very family orientated. But their subsequent purpose, once they became underground and subterranean, was a lot more dark and foreboding. I tell you what, he very nearly did say that when I nearly dropped it in the river. Believe me, he was... Actually, before we go on, my husband proposed to me on this bridge. Not Charles Bridge, a different bridge, because Charles Bridge was packed. And I was shaking so much, I didn't put the ring on, I just shut the box straight away, because I was shaking so much, I was really scared I was going to drop it in the river. He still doesn't believe me to this day. That's why I shut the box as fast as I did. He thought it was because I was going to say no. But anyway, so there you go. My precious. I do need to do more live. Yeah, thanks, Kerry. Yeah, and I'll ignore the chat room, I think. Anyway, so, right, back to the show. I've done a lot of work on this. I'm not letting it go. So, not only would invading soldiers over the 800 years have hidden there, and there were a lot of invading soldiers over the years trying to get into Prague, treasures would have been stored there, and parts of it, the emptied old town hall well, was made into a dungeon, as would other parts of this underground network, as the town... I'm trying to keep going, Keza G. Richard, you can't keep quiet. It's not in your nature, you know. Just bear in mind, I have the mic here, and I can get my own back. Anyway, so the town hall itself would have been used as a courtroom. Well, following the Battle of Bilaora, or the Battle of White Mountain as it translates to, in November 1620, 27 noblemen who had taken part in the Protestant revolt were sentenced to death. Among those waiting in prison condemned to die, Jakim Andrei Slik, Kaspar Kipelir, and Jan Jesensky, the rector of the university in Prague. They waited while the labourers worked, readying the platform which was placed just outside the old town hall. They were waiting for the longest day of the year, the 21st of June, 1621. Well, just in time, their work was done, and a black cloth was drawn around the construction in preparation for this dreadful event. Part of the historic town hall was also covered in black. And you can only imagine, I don't even know if we can imagine, the absolute unbearable tension which prevailed. Think of it, 27 different men were about to be put to their deaths by the infamous executioner Jan Milaš, himself reputed to be a Protestant anyway. And he was executing these men for being the same faith as himself. This meant that whilst Milaš was forced to do his job, despite being sympathetic, he eschewed the normal black hood worn by Prague and other executioners, and chose a red one. He also made sure that his 4 swords that he was going to use, and that he blunted whilst executing these men, were sharpened to perfection to make the execution swift, and trying to show some mercy, I guess. 3 of the men were hung from the gallows outside the town hall. Or one of the nobles, Andrei Slik, was amongst those beheaded. When the executions that had started at 5 a.m. finally ended at 9 a.m, Milaš gathered 12 of the heads, put them in iron baskets and suspended them from the towers at both ends of the Charles Bridge, 6 being placed on each tower. Slik's widow petitioned to be allowed to claim her husband's head and bury it with the rest of his body, and she received permission to do that a year later. The other 11 heads? They remained on the bridge for nearly 20 years. 20 years. And that was one of the main bridges across that river. Well, these noblemen are still meant to haunt Charles Bridge, and tourists and passers-by have heard voices calling out to them late at night. Now, I've walked along that bridge, and yeah, it's a tourist trap. There's hundreds of people on it at all times. But it does have a very uncomfortable feel to it. And this was before I knew this history. I can tell you that this was before I knew any of this. You do feel like you're being watched. Although, this could also be due with the statues that line it, and that make me think of an episode of Doctor Who. If you don't know what I'm referring to, Google a picture of the bridge, Charles Bridge, and you'll see these statues. And it's like I think it was it the Weeping Angels episode of Doctor Who? Whenever you blinked your eyes, the statues moved. It's kind of akin to that. So, other than this being a bit of a gruesome tale, what's the paranormal bit? Where's the spooky side to it? Well, if you do ever find yourself in Prague, and do go if you ever get the opportunity, seriously, I'm not joking, I love this city. Go to the Old Town Square and look up at the Old Town Hall. But for a few minutes, stop looking up and look down. Look down at the ground, and you will see 27 white crosses sort of embossed into the paving area. I know, I hate them too, Kerry. They freak me right out. Anyway, these crosses are to symbolise these poor executed noblemen. And they're also where the executioner's platform stood. So yes, you're standing right where these 27 men were killed. Right on it. At twilight on the 21st of June, these noblemen return to this spot and stare up at the astronomical clock. No, the river that runs through Prague is the Vltava, Richard. Not the Danube, the Vltava, spelt Vltava. There you go. But anyway, these noblemen will stand and stare up at the astronomical clock to check all is well with Prague. Legend has it that if it's not working, they will rise up again in revolt, ready to defend Prague to their last breath. So, if you're in that city, you're welcome, Rich. If you're in the city of Prague, at twilight, on the 21st of June, go and have a look to see if the noblemen are there, checking out their beloved city. Should we have a quick break? Don't go anywhere.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
Welcome back. Thanks for hanging around. So, what are we on to now? 1700s, I think. Now, you may feel I'm sort of flying through the timelines here, but for a city that is meant to be one of the most haunted in the world, and that's something that they say themselves, there is a distinct lack of recorded evidence. And it really makes me want to go out there again with all my gadgets and see what I can find. Road trip, anyone? Oh, it's a beautiful place, it really is. Can I just say, though, I know I keep talking about it, but before we get on to my next story, which is regarding a French soldier, that Prague is genuinely, and this isn't me being sort of sycophantic or anything like that, it is genuinely one of my top 5 favourite cities in the world. It's completely fascinating. It's a real European outdoor cafe culture, even when it is -5. And it's got a total dichotomy of building style, from the Gothic of Bohemia and the Old Town to the very symmetrical and clinical, more communist side of the New Town. As you drive into Prague from the airport, you see the tram going to and fro, and you see blocks of apartments which you would recognise instantly as communist Russian from just one glance. This total identikit design and build which shows you the history of the city, which it doesn't even have to say a word. It shows you the history without saying a word. In fact, even walking round Prague, the people have a divide. The younger generation, who are dressed in the very Western styles, will look you straight in the eye and in effect sort of challenge you. They have no fear, compared to the older generation who had lived their lives during the communist rule and experienced life during the communist rule. They're still dressed in their utilitarian drab clothes, their warm fur hats, which again just looks like something from that bygone era that you used to see on television about sort of the Iron Curtain, the communist types of things, and are trying to make themselves as invisible as possible, as they grew up in a time when you didn't want to be noticed and you didn't want to make eye contact, as making eye contact could, well, get you arrested. Yeah, it's exactly like that, Richard. Exactly like that. It's quite strange, especially say the dichotomy of the Old Town compared to the more communist bit. But if you don't believe me on any of this, do go to Prague and go to the Communist Museum. If that doesn't make you shudder as you realise what went on behind the Iron Curtain, well, nothing will. But it really makes you understand how brainwashed these elderly residents were just to survive day to day and not to get arrested by the secret police. And like I say, go to the Communist Museum to read accounts of what would have happened to them if somebody had reported them. Right, onto a place called Vyšehrad. Now in Czech, this word means upper castle, and it's a historic fort located in Prague, rumoured to be well over 900 years old. This place is credited as having one angry and volatile spirit attached to the building, the ghost of a French major. Well, the major was commander, or one of the commanders, of the French troops who invaded Prague in 1741. I told you there was lots of invasions when they used to hide out in the town hall. This was during the War of the Austrian Succession, and he was killed by a bullet shortly before the victorious end. It is rumoured he screamed "Sacre bleu" while sinking to the ground. After his untimely death, the French major went off the ghostly deep end, so to speak, and started to attack guards and soldiers alike, killing some but pardoning others that were so terrified. I don't know if he had a major curly moustache. Ooh la la. I've never seen him, Kerry. Anyway, he was pardoning others that were so terrified after the ordeal that they refused to speak. It was not until 1892 that the Major of France calmed his reign of terror down, thanks to a Lieutenant Pistora of Austria, who encountered the Major, and instead of showing terror, he saluted him. The Major laughed at the lieutenant, saluted him back, and went about his merry way. Supposedly his frame of mind has been happy ever since, and he does not attack. He merely nods respectfully at passers-by. Maybe I should go out there and have a chat with him. You never know. But Vyšehrad, it was also the home of the mythical founder of the city of Prague and the Czech people as a whole, Libuša, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. She belonged to the Přemysl dynasty. Now, Libuš founded Prague in the 8th century when she stood at the mighty fortress of Vyšehrad from Libušin Castle and envisioned the foundation of a mighty and magnificent city titled Praha, which in Czech means threshold. Mythical Libuš was the youngest daughter of the Czech ruler Krok, whose other daughters were Kazi, the healer, Teta, the magician, and Lebus was chosen by her father as his successor and proved to be wise and just, but was still, and please feel free not to comment on this, next comment, was still nonetheless a woman, which irritated the tribesmen. The tribe wished for a male ruler, and so the prophetess Lebus told them to seek out a specific man, a farmer who happened to be wearing a broken sandal and ploughing his field. The tribesmen, found the farmer, Premils, from Stadis village, who abandoned his plough and married Lebus. Thus the beginning of the Premislid dynasty continued with their child, Nezemils. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these right. She was also, Lebus here, was meant to have bathed with men and then thrown them off the cliffs to their deaths. Good lass. My kind of gal. Now, alright, I was having a bit of a giggle with that one, but this last chapter that I'm going to talk about, and this is the one where Richard is probably going to come in and talk a bit as well, so feel free. And thank you for that comment about Battle of Blenheim and everything else. Obviously Blenheim is also an aeroplane, but anyway. My last chapter, and I am going to be serious on this, is during the German occupation of Czechoslovakia, and how the people coped with the Nazi regime, and also how these amazing people, they fought back. On the 15th of March 1939, which, if you work out your dates, is actually 79 years ago tomorrow, and I didn't actually know this when I was planning this show, it's just a spooky coincidence. Hitler's German forces marched into Czechoslovakia, taking over Bohemia and declaring themselves protectorate over Slovakia. This was in direct conflict with the Munich Agreement, which had been signed in the early hours of the 29th of September 1938, in the hope of alleviating the risk of war and allowing Hitler to annex surrounding areas of Czechoslovakia which contained German-speaking residents, and creating a new, I suppose you could call it, Super Germany, which they were going to call Sudetenland. By actually invading Czechoslovakia as a whole, it was then evident that Hitler was not going to respect any treaty or agreement and was not going to stop his march across Europe. This is all well known. Well, I hope it is, my fellow history buffs. But a few weeks later, the then British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain stopped trying to contain Hitler as he had been doing, and instead announced that if the Nazis invaded Poland, there would be war. When I explain it to, say, my son, my young son asked me to explain it, and I kind of say that Chamberlain said, okay, you can take that bit, but if you take that bit, there's trouble. Right, you've taken that bit. Well, if you take this bit, there's going to be trouble. Okay, you've taken that. Right, there is trouble now. Kind of gave him a few chances, but then, no, that was it. And on the 1st of September 1939, Hitler's forces did just that. They invaded Poland. And 2 short days later, on the 3rd of September 1939, the iconic, and if you listen to it, I think it's actually quite chilling, the radio announcement by Chamberlain rang out on wirelesses across the nation. Just a small bit of it. This morning, the British... I can't do the accent. I'm just going to read it properly. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that, unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland. A state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany. Now, this act would probably have been of little comfort to the people of Czechoslovakia, who from September 1941 had been under control of one of the most feared and senior members of the Gestapo, the SS, and also someone who Hitler himself is meant to have described as the man with the iron heart. Now, this man was an utterly despicable character, seen as one of the main architects of the final solution, one of the predominant organisers of Kristallnacht, which was a pogrom against Jews, where not only did hundreds actually perish, but over 30,000 were arrested and sent to concentration camps. And this man who was now running Czechoslovakia, was directly responsible. And remember, Hitler said he had an iron heart. Hitler said he had an iron heart. Now, nearly 76 years ago, on the 18th of June 1942, 7 Czech and Slovak airmen who were part of something called Operation Anthropoid, which was basically the operation for the assassination of this horrific man, made their last stand in the eerie basement of the Cathedral Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius, and where they're still commemorated, and rightly so, to this day. Now, this man, Heydrich, as he's known, had been sent to Prague as governor of the Czech territory, as his predecessor, von Neurath, had been felt to have been too lenient. Well, it is, isn't it, Kerry? But it just makes you realise how despicable this man was. If someone like Hitler can actually think he had an iron heart, just wait and see what happens, though. It's, yeah, people come up with films and think that history's boring. Well, no, it's not. Some of it is like a horror story in its own right. But that leniency that von Neurath was meant to have shown would have been no problem for Heydrich, as I don't think the word lenient was even his vocabulary. He wouldn't have known how to spell it for sure. It didn't take long before the Czechoslovak government in exile began plotting his assassination in revenge for his extreme brutality with his combination of repressive measures, mass executions, and then perceived mollification of the Czechoslovak people in an attempt to Germanise them, whilst eradicating those who could not be Germanised. 2 men who had fled their country, Joseph Gabček and Jan Kubis, were selected to carry out the assassination and were trained by the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, amazing people, look them up if you've not heard of them, in how to do this assassination. And on the 29th of December 1941, they were parachuted in by the RAF. 5 other brave Czechoslovak paratroopers joined them, who had also been trained by the British. Yes, there is. I haven't seen it actually, but I was looking at it as part of my research. Thanks, Rich. These men had been trained by the British as well. Joseph Bublik, Jan Hruby, Joseph Valchek, Jaroslav Zvark and Adolf Olpacher. On the 27th of May 1942, Gabček and Kubis ambushed the open-top Mercedes in which Heydrich was being driven through round the Prague suburb of Kobylisy. Gabček stepped out in front of the vehicle as it slowed to take a bend, but to his horror, his Sten submachine gun that he was aiming at the car jammed. Heydrich, ordering his driver to stop, stood up in the back of the car and he returned fire. It was at this point that Kubis threw a type of anti-tank grenade at the car which exploded, blowing the doors off. The incident didn't kill Heydrich immediately. Shrapnel wounds caused him to die of septicemia some 8 days later. I'm probably not the only one that hoped that he was in a lot of pain as that happened. The others, who had been appointed lookouts and such like, fled the scene, making their way to the church I mentioned earlier. When the gun battle in June finally began, after the men were given away by a fellow British-trained Czechoslovak parachutist, Kirill Kurda, who had collaborated with the Gestapo for a new identity and, in effect, his 30 pieces of silver, the men at this point, surrounded by over 800 troops, knew that they had no way out, and not wanting to be captured, they took their own lives by either cyanide poisoning or shooting themselves. This wasn't the end, though. Nazi intelligence falsely linked to the assassins to the towns of Ladice and Lezaki. And this is horrific. A Gestapo report stated that Ladice, which is about 14 miles northwest of Prague, was suspected as the assailants' hiding place, and Hitler ordered brutal reprisals. Over 13,000 people were arrested, deported, and then imprisoned. Beginning on the 10th of June, all males over the age of 16 in the villages of Ladice and Lezaki were murdered. All the women in Lezaki were also murdered. All but 4 of the women from Ladice were deported immediately to Ravensbrück concentration camp. 4 of them were pregnant. They were subjected to forced abortions at the same hospital where Heydrich had died, and the women were then sent to the concentration camp. Some children were chosen for Germanisation, and 81 were killed in gas vans at the Chelmno extermination camp. Both of these towns were burned, and Ladice's ruins were levelled. At least 1,300 people were massacred after Heydrich's death. It leaves me speechless, believe it or not. And I'm not joking. I'm not looking for someone to laugh. It genuinely leaves me speechless. Heydrich's replacements were Ernst Kaltenbrunner and Karl Hermann Frank and Kurt Daluege, I don't know if I pronounced those right, as the new acting rulers, I suppose. After Heydrich's death, implementation of the policies formalised at the Wannsee Conference he chaired were accelerated. The first 3 true death camps, designed for mass killing with no legal process or pretext, were built and operated at Treblinka, Sobibor and Belzec. The project was named Operation Reinhardt after Heydrich. And Hitler had said Heydrich had the Iron Heart. I don't think I'd want 3 death camps named after me, would you? If you're still hungry for more, and there is more, go and visit Huska Castle just outside of Prague. This place, although built in the 1200s, has a fearsome reputation for the paranormal, and many residents, old and new, believe it is the portal to hell from which demons can escape. Caretakers of the building have witnessed a headless spirit that stumbles through the courtyard, streams of blood gushing from his decapitated body, whose identity they've never managed to uncover. The current owner of the building claims to have watched his drinking glass levitate off a table where he and his friends had gathered one evening, only for it to calmly lower itself and just slide to the table's centre. One of the most evil presences is regularly encountered in the hunting lodge. One evening, 2 guests, Zadina Vrazlova and her husband, were winding down in the room when they heard a loud thump on the floor next to them. When Zadina turned to look at the source of the noise, she was frozen in fear as 2 featureless humanoid shadow figures approached her and whispered to her about them having killed 2 young girls. Not surprising, then, that the occult-fascinated Himmler, back to the Nazis again, chose it to be a base of operations during their occupation of Czechoslovakia. It is not, however, known precisely what they were doing at the castle, because in typical SS fashion, they destroyed all records and all evidence of their activities when the German forces retreated from Bohemia upon the being confronted with the advancing Allied forces. The castle was of no, I suppose you could say, strategic significance whatsoever to the German war effort or occupation, and given the known facts of the occult philosophies underpinning Heinrich Himmler's SS and Nazism in general, coupled with the knowledge that Hitler himself channeled significant resources into researching the discovery of supernatural weapons to use against the Allies, it's not unreasonable to propose that the SS's reasons for occupying the castle were, in some form, directly related to the castle's reputation with the occult and its supposed gateway to hell. Although some might argue, when being told stories such as the one I told, well, it was not even a story, is it? Recounting of history about Ladis and Lazaki, human demons in human form do walk this earth already. It's also been proposed that Huska was one of the SS's secret breeding farms, a location where young women of acceptable blood were impregnated by able-bodied and carefully chosen Aryan SS troopers in the ongoing effort to breed Hitler's master race. Whatever its actual significance to the Nazis, however, they saw fit to litter the area with landmines, so much so that the current owners stop people going into certain areas as they're not 100% sure that they have cleared them all. I know we talk about, well, it's one of the things that we talk about in the paranormal world, about not provoking spirits and about being polite, and that these spirits were people once. But I'm not sure I could be polite if someone like Himmler or Heydrich came through. Could any of you honestly say you would be? Would you not just be gunning to take on these bullies and psychos of the highest order? Well, you've been listening to me for nearly 52 minutes. I'm very impressed I haven't heard snoring. That's my short tour of Prague. There's a lot more we could talk about. We could talk about the ossuary at Sedlec. We could talk more about Prague Castle. There's more about Charles Bridge. We didn't even get onto the subject of Wenceslas Square, where a poor man in the 1960s set himself on fire in protest at the communist regime. We didn't even talk about that when the Nazis were overthrown and they actually blew up the old town hall that I mentioned earlier because they knew there was a lot of Czech resistance fighters hiding there, that the Czechs thought they were going to be better off without the Nazis, and they just swapped one autocratic rule for another. But on that note, I shall finish, as you're probably well and truly sick to the back teeth of hearing my voice. Don't worry. Next week I have a genuine telly box star as my co-host and my guest, Mr. Scott Porter of Ghost Asylum and Haunted Towns fame. We're going to be talking about the one and only Salem, and that's not one to be missed. However, I shall bid you adieu, or should I say doabru noc, which is Czech for good night. Oh, I'm that much of a show-off. Well done again to Kelly Edwards, who's won the tickets for Fort Orsted. We will be in touch. And don't forget that Parasearch has shows 6 nights of the week, and all of them are stored for your listening pleasure on Spreaker and YouTube. But until we meet again, my lovely lot, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.